Over on Jaguar Gator 8, a new college football video is out. In this video, we talk about a crazy bowl game involving Georgia Tech, where a quarterback who was never expected to play came into the game and lit it up against all odds. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch. Also join me tomorrow night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern, where we'll play some NFL trivia for a chance to win cash prizes. Link to join below. And now, on with our featured presentation. Getting drafted is often the highlight of a player's career at the time. All of the hard work that you put in, all of the sacrifices you had to make to get to this point, and all the blood, sweat, and tears that you gave were all worth it. Because now, you're officially in the NFL. You're officially one of the best of the best, and you get to play this sport for a living, like you always dreamed of as a child. And you can feel the nervous energy in these players leading up to the draft, wondering where, and especially during the night of the draft, where each second feels like a minute, and each minute feels like an hour as they wait to hear their name get called. With such a momentous occasion, you would think that every player who gets drafted would know right away that they got drafted, especially if they were a high first-round pick that was projected to fly off the board immediately. But imagine if when Kyle Pitts got chosen 4th overall in 2021 on that Thursday, that he had no idea that he was drafted until Sunday, because he forgot that the draft was even happening. And somehow, no one let him know about it. Seems kinda crazy, right? Well, this actually happened once, and how it happened is rather hysterical. This is the story behind the 1971 NFL Draft, the Buffalo Bills, wide receiver J.D. Hill, and the funniest moment in the draft in the over 60-year history of that franchise. Before I talk about the incident in question, we need some context to understand the player involved, why the Bills wanted him, how the draft was going, and perhaps most importantly, why he had no idea that he got chosen. Unfortunately, I have no college highlights available of this player, simply because finding any extensive and high-quality footage of college football from the 1960s is like trying to dig for buried treasure. So enjoy highlights of the player playing in the NFL for the Bills, because I don't think I'm giving anything away when I say that he wound up playing for the Bills at the end of the day. However, entering the 1971 NFL Draft, there were few receivers more highly touted and highly regarded than this man right here. This is Arizona State wide receiver J.D. Hill, and even though he played his collegiate career in a smaller conference, with the WAC not exactly being the most prominent conference at the Division I level, it seemed like every team wanted a receiver of his skill set. During his time with the Sun Devils, he was absolutely electrifying, with reports that he could run 100 yards in 9.3 seconds. He made his presence felt with ASU in his first season in 1967, when he finished the season with 8 receiving touchdowns, which was inside the top 10 in the NCAA, and was second in the WAC, only behind BYU wide receiver Phil Odell. And he played a big part that season as to why ASU not only finished the season with an 8-2 record, but finished with the #1 scoring offense in college football, averaging 35 points per game. While Hill was a great receiver at the start of his collegiate career, it was during his final season with the team in 1970 that things would take off. Because in 1970, as Arizona State finished the season undefeated with an 11-0 record, along with their first bowl win ever by defeating North Carolina in the Peach Bowl, along with their highest AP ranking ever at the time with a number 6 finish, perhaps the biggest reason why they achieved the success was because of Hill, who was a household name around the college football circuit. In 1970, 4 players on ASU finished second in receiving touchdowns, with the 4 of them each scoring 2. J.D. Hill led the team with 10. Ed Beverly finished second on the team in receptions with 24, as he was the only player outside of Hill to have at least 15 catches all season. Hill had 58. The offense ran through J.D. Hill in getting the ball in his hands, and by the time the season ended, he was atop the WAC in almost every major statistical category, finishing second in receiving yards, first in receptions, first in receiving touchdowns, and first in total touchdowns. Hill became the first receiver in school history to ever receive an All-American nomination, became the first player in school history to ever have over 1,000 receiving yards in a season when you factor bowl games into consideration, and was the first player in school history to ever have double-digit receiving touchdowns in a single season, and had 13 consecutive games with a touchdown dating back to the end of the 1969 season, which remains a school record. This means that he scored a touchdown in literally every single game during the 1970 campaign. He was that good. Everyone knew who J.D. Hill was, and every NFL team seemed to want his talents. And one of those teams happened to be the Buffalo Bills. The bad news for the Bills was that in 1970, they were not a good team, not in the slightest bit. During the 1970 season, which was the first that the Bills played in the NFL after the merger, they were one of the worst teams in football, finishing with the 4th worst offense and the 4th worst defense in football, along with the 4th worst point differential in football. They went just 3-10-1. And even though things didn't start out terribly, as they were 3-4 through their first half of the season and were fairly mediocre, the final 7 games were painful. Not only did the Bills go winless over those 7 games, but they were outscored 190-81 in that stretch, losing by an average of 3 possessions per game. Oddly enough, I talked about one of the losses in that stretch, when they allowed the Chicago Bears and quarterback Bobby Douglas to throw for 4 touchdown passes while he was dealing with a broken wrist. You can learn more about that game by clicking the card in the upper right corner. However, there was a bright spot, and that is the reason you're seeing these positive highlights. And that bright spot was the play of rookie quarterback Dennis Shaw. The Bills drafted Shaw out of San Diego State in the second round of the 1970 NFL Draft. And while it wasn't exactly the smoothest season, as he threw 20 interceptions on just 10 touchdown passes, there were quite a few bright spots. He engineered 3 fourth-quarter comebacks, showing his ability to perform in the clutch. He finished 6th in the league in passing yards, and amongst all quarterbacks in the AFC, actually had the second most passing yards that season, only behind Darryl LaMonica of the Oakland Raiders. And he was the first quarterback to ever be named the Offensive Rookie of the Year by the Associated Press, and would be the last quarterback to receive this honor all the way until 2004, when Ben Roethlisberger won it for the Pittsburgh Steelers. There were some solid pieces on offense in Buffalo for Shaw to work with. He had O.J. Simpson at running back, the former first overall pick from the 1969 NFL Draft, who would eventually become one of the best running backs in NFL history before doing other things. He had Marlon Briscoe, a Pro Bowl receiver who had over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns, and even somehow got an MVP vote for that season. No, I have no clue how that happened or what writer was drunk enough to give a receiver on a 3-10-1 team his vote for the MVP. And he had Hayden Moses, the former first-round pick from 1968 and the former AFL All-Star from 1969. The goal for 1971 was simple: surround Shaw with more talent, especially since the team was lacking depth at the receiver position. As the head coach said, "I like to throw the ball. I am still interested in the running game, but the easy touchdown pass discourages people." With that, when the 4th pick in the draft rolled around, the Bills knew exactly who they were going to take. The only problem? The player had no idea. Before I go any further, I want to emphasize 3 things. Number 1, this was not a surprise draft. Everyone knew when the draft was and what date it was going to be held on, so it's not like this came out of nowhere. Number 2, literally everyone knew that J.D. Hill was going to be taken early on. In no way whatsoever was it a reach, and in no way whatsoever was it a surprise when Hill was chosen as the first non-quarterback off the board, with Jim Plunkett, Archie Manning, and Dan Pastorini going 1, 2, 3. As a side note, to learn more about the bizarre start to that 1971 NFL Draft with Plunkett, click the card in the upper right corner. And number 3, J.D. Hill knew that he was going to be drafted. He was named the MVP at the Senior Bowl, and was asked a question after his strong performance at the game about the draft. He said, "I do not have a favorite pro team I would like to play for. I will do my best for whoever chooses me. Just the privilege of being able to play in the pros is all I want." In other words, this was not a guy who was thinking about giving up football after college, had no aspirations to play professionally, and was not projected to go until day 2, at which point he'd have to debate whether the low pay and beating would be worth it. Everyone knew that J.D. Hill was going to be playing at the next level. On January 28, 1971, when the Bills turned in their draft card, and when Commissioner Pete Rozelle read it, J.D. Hill's name was the lucky name on the card. But in the aftermath on the papers the next day, while you saw breakdowns by writers of the pick, and while you saw front office members commenting on the pick, you didn't see J.D. Hill comment on the situation. Because as it turns out, amazingly enough, J.D. Hill did not know he was drafted. Now this was not like a Joe Thomas going fishing situation where he did this to take his mind off things, but then obviously knew after returning to land that he was a Cleveland Brown. No, J.D. Hill legitimately forgot about the draft, and he forgot the next day, and the day after that. For 3 whole days, J.D. Hill, the 4th overall pick in the NFL Draft, was a Buffalo Bill, and had no idea that he was a Bill. Hill was born in California, and he went up to California that week to hang out with friends and family, completely forgetting that this was the week of the draft. He was playing pickup basketball and visiting family members out in Fresno, and only on January 31st, a full 72 hours after he actually got drafted, did he realize that he was going to be playing in the NFL and was going to be packing his bags and moving to the opposite side of the country. As Hill said in a 1987 retrospective on that situation, "I had forgotten about the draft." Now, we've done stories before from the 1994 NFL Draft of players who were asleep when they got drafted, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But they knew that the draft was going on. Hill legitimately had no idea that there was a draft, even though he talked about the possibility of getting drafted and was looking forward to it. That raises the question, how did he eventually find out that he got drafted? Prepare yourselves for some absolutely hysterical hijinks. There is a story that matches up perfectly with J.D. Hill's timeline and realization that it took 3 whole days for him to realize that the Bills picked him. And when you realize all the things that had to happen for it to get to this point, it truly becomes a work of comedy that I don't think anyone could script any better. A day or 2 after the draft, Hill flew down to Atlanta to attend a banquet, receiving the 100% Wrong Club's College Offensive Football Player of the Year award. Keep in mind that prior to flying out, he didn't look at the news or read the papers, and not a single one of his friends or family members did the same thing and reach him. Additionally, no one on the Bills reached out to him or could reach him. At the airport, no one there informed him that he was drafted. When he landed in Atlanta, not a single person congratulated him on being drafted. Even though this was 1971 and information was not received more than half a century ago in the same way that it is received today, I still have no idea how this is possible. Anyways, when Hill was at the Marriott for the banquet, he saw this man right here. This is Clarence Scott, and he was drafted 14th overall by the Cleveland Browns. For the record, Scott had an exceptional career at the next level, playing 13 seasons for the Browns and starting 166 games, even making it to the Pro Bowl in 1973. After the two men greeted each other and began chatting, Scott spoke at the banquet. And Scott spoke about what a thrill it was to get drafted by the Browns, saying, "You know, it's strange, but of all the teams in pro football, I guess I've always wanted to play with the Browns. So I was really excited when they told me before the draft that they were looking for a defensive back, and they thought I was the best around. And I was really excited when team president Art Modell called me Thursday and said I was their #1 pick." And at that moment, Hill had a realization. Oh yeah, the draft! I totally forgot about the draft! Somehow, for 3 whole days, neither Hill nor anyone close to him read the news, and it took Hill being on the complete opposite side of the country at a football banquet where one of his friends spoke about what a thrill it was to get drafted that he realized that the NFL draft took place, that he was drafted, and that he probably should check as to what team drafted him. Again, this wasn't a case of Hill wanting to be ignorant and take his mind off things. He legitimately forgot when the draft was. Even back in 1971, I have absolutely no idea how this happens, especially considering the fact that we're dealing with the first non-quarterback taken off the board. Yet, despite this incredibly bizarre start to Hill's career, I think it's safe to say that things turned out alright in the end. Turns out, Hill was a very solid receiver in the NFL throughout the first half of the 1970s, and when he was at his peak, offered a dynamic threat in Buffalo's passing game, even though a lot of it came through Joe Ferguson and not through Dennis Shaw, who flamed out and was somewhat of a one-season wonder after that Offensive Rookie of the Year campaign in 1970. In just his second season in the NFL, Hill led the team in all 3 major statistical receiving categories, finishing in the 1972 season with 52 receptions for 754 yards and 5 touchdowns. For his efforts, Hill was named to the first Pro Bowl of his career. Hill also finished that season 9th in the NFL in receiving yards, as well as 6th in receptions. In fact, during the 1972 season, if you looked at every player in the AFC to have at least 50 receptions and 750 receiving yards, the list would consist of just 4 players: Fred Biletnikoff, Chip Myers, Otis Taylor, and none other than J.D. Hill. Hill finished inside the top 10 in the NFL in receiving touchdowns in 1974 and 1975, and during the 1974 season, was instrumental in helping guide the Bills to the playoffs for the first time since the 1966 season, and for the first time since the merger. In 1974, Hill led the team with 572 yards and 6 touchdowns, becoming the top target of Ferguson under center. Hill was traded to the Detroit Lions prior to the start of the 1976 season, but in his solid 5-year stint with the Bills, Hill finished with 160 receptions for 2,631 yards and 20 touchdowns, finishing 3rd in franchise history at the time in receptions, 4th in receiving yards, and 2nd in receiving touchdowns. And 16 years after getting drafted, Hill's son, Lonzel, would get drafted in the 2nd round by the New Orleans Saints. Unlike his father, Lonzel knew right away that he was chosen. Today, a situation like this seems almost unthinkable. Just the idea that a guy could go 3 days without knowing that he was drafted, even though he was a prominent player who everyone knew was going to go early on, is insane. Not one friend, not one family member, not one random person, and not one team official reached out to him and told him that he was drafted. And not once in that 3-day period did Hill stop and wonder when the draft was. Chris Berman famously says that nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. But back in the 70s, nobody circled their calendars, or forgot to circle their calendars for that matter, like the Buffalo Bills. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. To see college football videos, subscribe to JaguarGator8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. so you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.